What's going on, guys? National Master Nelson Lopez here, and today I'm going to give you a beginner-friendly overview of the French defense in 4 minutes. So the French defense is played by black. After e4, you play e6, d4, and then d5. Now the same position can arise if white starts with e4 or if white starts with d4, and so this is very common against e4 and d4 players. First thing I want to point out is that if white just captures your pawn, you simply recapture, and this is a very easy position for black to play. Your knights can develop naturally to nice squares. Both bishops have access to really anywhere they want to go, and it's a very equal position. So most white players won't just exchange pawns. So there's usually 2 ways that the game could go. The first one is white could play pawn to e5. This is called the advanced variation. The idea behind the advanced variation is that white gets nice space. It's very easy for him to develop his pieces. Black, on the other hand, is a little bit cramped, particularly this bishop on c8. This is what's called a bad bishop. It's a bad bishop because it's behind black's pawn chain. So if this bishop on c8 was out here on f5, you can see how this diagonal would be a nice place for the bishop to be. Back here on c8, it's very limited. So that sometimes can be a drawback of the French defense. So black's plan against the advanced variation is fairly straightforward. It's simply to put as much pressure as you can on d4, because if you undermine the d4 pawn, then the e5 pawn will fall shortly after. So c5, putting pressure. Usually white will play c3 to defend it. Knight c6, again, putting more pressure. White plays knight to f3 to defend it. Now black plays queen to b6. Again, everything is lining up on the d4 square. Now at this point, the main line is a3, and the idea behind a3 is that white wants to play b4, because if white gets b4, and it becomes very hard for black to put more pressure on this d4 square. So as an example, if black simply plays like bishop d7 and white plays b4, you have to do something with your pawn because he's going to capture it. So after you take and he takes back, you can see how black's position is extremely cramped. This bishop is kind of hitting a wall. This bishop is not doing much. And you can see white's position is wide open and he has a lot more space. So after a3, usually black will play c4. So the idea is that black is really gaining space on the queen side and preventing white from playing that b4 move. Now if white plays b4, black simply has en passant, and you would take this pawn with your pawn. And a lot of times when you see long pawn chains, it's a good idea to attack in the direction of your pawn chain. So black has this one going this direction. He should try to mount some sort of attack on the queen side. And you see white has this pawn chain aiming this direction, so he should probably aim for an attack on the king side. So you get these interesting positions where black's trying to put pressure on the queen side and white's trying to put pressure on the king side. So going back, instead of the advanced variation, the other main idea that white has is simply defend this pawn with his knight. And you can go to d2 or to c3. c3 is the main line, although d2 is played quite a bit as well. Against knight c3, bishop to b4 is the main line for black. This is called the Winawer variation. And black's simply trying to put pressure on this e4 square by taking away the knight's ability to defend it because it's pinned. Now white's main move at this point is to play e5, and you might think that looks similar to the advanced variation, and it is, but the fact that these 2 moves have already been played changes things quite a bit, and the positions that you get tend to be very different than from the advanced variation. So the main line at this point goes c5, putting more pressure on d4. White plays a3 to kick away this bishop. Captures, and now knight to e7. And now there's a line called the poised pawn variation that's very interesting. Queen to g4. Black actually just lets white capture it and plays queen to c7. And after takes, you play rook to g8. The rook's defended by your knight. And after queen takes h7, black can capture on d4, and this is a very tricky position for both sides. So it's tricky for black because obviously his king is not entirely safe. You're not going to be able to castle this way because you've moved your rook. You're missing some pawns. The queen is kind of in your face. White's king is not entirely safe either. If he tries to do something like natural, just like capturing the pawn, then black has queen c3, forking the king and rook, and white simply loses a rook. So it's a very tricky position for both sides to play. There you go, very basic overview of the French defense. We looked at the advanced variation and the Winawer poised pawn variation. Let me know in the comments below if that was helpful or if you had questions about anything. As always, thanks for watching and take care.